Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leon Vainstein speaking from Los Angeles, California. Well, all right, today, as usual, we have a program packed with news and events. The Supreme Court has issued a number of rulings and temporary decisions that significantly ease the work of Trump and his administration right now. The Democrats have found a way to interfere with Trump, as you know, in his efforts to improve life in America. The main goal of the Democrats is not to improve life in America, but to prevent Trump from doing it, God forbid. So, how do they do it? They do it through the courts. This is what's called a loophole in the law, and it has been used before, a little bit, but never in such quantities. And that's how it is.
President Bush had only 6 during his first term, Obama had 12, and Trump had 64. Look where we are now with Trump, 2040 in just 5 months.
The loophole in the law is that a local judge, well, we call them a district judge, is not limited to the territory of their district, but can issue rulings that the entire country is required to follow until that ruling is overturned. Naturally, Trump filed with the Supreme Court to correct this provision. And today we'll talk about what happened. I'll tell you right away, there's something positive. It's actually very simply positive in this sense. Another topic for the Supreme Court is the right of a child to receive American citizenship, even if they were born in the United States to illegal immigrants. We have these kinds of strange laws supposedly to enter America legally. But more on that later. The Democratic Party's candidate for mayor of New York came from Uganda back in the day. When he applied for citizenship, he apparently forgot to mention that he supports communists and terrorist organizations. And accordingly, the United States State Department considered these organizations to be terrorist, or so to speak, in some way communist and the like. And therefore, he was supposed to report this in his application for American citizenship. Now it is being determined whether he reported it or not. If it turns out that he didn't, then theoretically his citizenship could be revoked, and he could be deported from the country, having his citizenship taken away. That would be an interesting turn of events, and we'll talk about that as well. But let's start with NATO and the individuals who control the process of ending or not ending the war in Ukraine. That is, the presidents of 3 countries, Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. Guess who is the only one among these 3 people who wants peace? Of course, everyone already knows that among the NATO leadership, Trump has the nickname Daddy. We learned this from the speech of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who, when asked about Trump's strong language, since he apparently got angry and started swearing, replied, "Well, what can you do? Daddy sometimes has to use language that children can understand accordingly, and it seems that Trump really liked being called Daddy." And actually, this was the most remarkably productive NATO summit. We're used to nothing happening at these summits in this sleepy alliance. But with Trump, nothing works. In his previous term, Trump demanded that NATO countries, NATO members of the alliance, jointly arm themselves with modern weapons, spending at least 2% of their budgets. Trump left, Biden came, Biden order will be restored in the White House. And right away, all these countries, most of the countries, rolled back their rearmament programs, counting on the fact that the United States, with its own money and its own soldiers, with the lives of its Americans, not their French, Germans, and so on, will protect them from, well, let's say, whoever needs to be protected from today, for example, China and the Russian Federation. By the way, they never got tired of trading with them, and they spent their money not on defense, but on social programs. This time, Trump 47 said 5% or we won't protect you, 5% of the budget. And against all expectations, by the way, I really didn't expect it. And the members agreed. Either they think they can trick him or they realized it won't work. But it seems that seeing how Europe has become so depleted, They can't even imagine how they could defend themselves from a Russian invasion. For example, when it was necessary to help Ukraine, the Europeans found out that they had neither weapons nor trained soldiers, and most importantly, no will to resist. And everyone saw this. Both Zelenskyy and Putin, and even in Africa, they saw it. In fact, several interesting events took place. At the request of several NATO members, Zelenskyy, that is, Ukraine, was not allowed to attend the meeting. He came there, as they say, to puff himself up, over there with them. Orban, the leader of the Magyars, stated that non-NATO members should not be present or take part in any awards or debates there. So, in my opinion, a few other countries supported him in this as well. As a result of the summit, all countries except Spain agreed to increase their external spending to 5% of their national budgets within the next decade, as I understand it. And the United States will control these contributions, will monitor them through NATO, but will monitor them nonetheless. So, there's no way around it. In other words, the only country, Spain, said it would not commit to a deadline for payment. To this, Trump, with a smirk, he had such a smirk during the press conference, said that we impose such tariffs on their goods that they'll end up paying twice as much as they were supposed to pay to NATO. That's how it is. I agree with Trump, by the way. If you don't want to participate, leave NATO. But if you want to be protected, pay up. And once again, this isn't a payment to the United States. It's not like they're paying us for mercenaries. No, it's about buying weapons and training their own army. Well, I'm curious, how does PUP react to all this? So our general, what's his name? Who is he today? Yeah, right, Pakan, yeah.
But what really stands out to me, Ariel, is how little Ukraine was mentioned in NATO's final declaration this year. I counted how many times, only twice compared to last year in Washington, when it was mentioned 61 times. Of course, back then it was Biden, now it's Trump, and we know that United States policy has softened. But there was a moment at yesterday's Trump press conference when he seemed to soften a bit as well. Well, just a little bit. He was talking to journalists, answering their questions after the summit, and then a Ukrainian journalist seemed to almost burst into tears. Take a look at this.
I would like to ask you, I'm from Ukraine, so my question to you is the United States ready to sell Patriot air defense missile systems to Ukraine? Now it's my turn.
You are currently living in Ukraine?
My husband is there.
Wow, I see that you know a lot. It's amazing that...
I'm with the kids. Actually, I'm in Warsaw because he wanted me to.
Your husband, now a soldier.
He is. That was Miroslava Pizza from the Ukrainian service. And you can see that she makes such a meaningful pause for the viewers, if not for Donald Trump. Donald Trump responded by saying, "We'll see if we can make some Patriot missiles available." But I think few people expected this kind of interaction, this kind of response in favor of these missiles, perhaps.
So Ukraine was barely mentioned. Trump said he would provide some Patriots.
I'm wondering how I'm curious how Vladimir Putin and Russia are reacting to these events, considering they've always wanted to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO and somehow interfere in the process. Yes, that's absolutely right. But the tough Russian defense minister is the one who responded on behalf of the Kremlin. His name is Andrei Belousov, and he warned that if Europe provides more weapons and, as he put it, mercenaries to Ukraine, it could destabilize Europe itself. And if we stop there, that's quite a clear threat to Europe itself. And it should be noted that he was at a meeting of defense ministers in China at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. If you're not familiar, that's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Some see it as an attempt to create a political and military counterbalance to NATO. With the participation of the countries you see on the screen, which are in the orbit of China and Russia, it includes the countries of Central Asia, some of which are ruled by strong leaders, like in Uzbekistan. The organization also includes India, Pakistan, as well as Iran, which we also often hear about in the news. By the way, today's meeting is probably not coincidentally taking place just one day after the NATO summit. Meanwhile, another meeting took place in France yesterday. There are a lot of meetings this week. The meeting of the Council of Europe on Human Rights, where a new special tribunal was established to consider crimes and aggression. After the NATO summit, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, a busy man, arrived in Strasbourg. He is the main supporter of this tribunal and shared his thoughts about the president of Russia. Listen.
Close political and legal cooperation will be needed so that every Russian war criminal is brought to justice.
Zelenskyy is trying to remind the public that Russia not only started the war, but also committed war crimes that the international community condemned. But the Ukrainian police are not negotiating as long as Russian troops occupy even a small part of Ukrainian land. This means the deaths of hundreds of thousands more. Well, let's say the destruction of cities, tension in the center of Europe. That's why the world's attitude toward Ukraine is ambiguous. People sympathize with them, of course, and at the same time feel irritation. I'm afraid that one day this irritation might outweigh the sympathy.
You know what President Trump objects to? To be continued. The same goes for the Republicans. Even Judge Kagan during the Obama administration said that this is really insane. When individual judges can actually freeze the work of the entire federal government, the court will have to decide whether they want to impose some limits.
To be continued.
If you want to stop everything nationwide, you need to file a class action lawsuit at the federal level. You need to prove that you represent people across the entire country. So that's one of the options.
It's really unclear for a single district court to handle an area larger than its own district. There needs to be, let's say, a lot of people who feel wronged filing lawsuits from many different parts of America.
The Trump administration was incredibly frustrated that local district court judges were issuing injunctions that blocked their agenda across the entire country. And this time, the Trump administration faced it especially harshly. Look at how this compares to previous years. You know, President Bush had only 6 such cases during his first term.
I already showed you this chart at the beginning, but it makes sense to look at it one more time.
Obama had 12. Trump had 64 in his first term. Look where we are now. This decision will only apply to the District of Massachusetts. That's how it will work.
Right, indeed. Unless this judge, Bill, is able to establish some kind of national class action or another standard that the court might introduce with its decision today. And the key point here is that, you know, presidents have really objected to these Lilliputian attacks. When they have to win on all of them,
Fronts.
they need to be sure that not a single one of the 670 federal judges will want to stop the immigration policy. And that makes the system unworkable. Because by the time presidents can overturn these orders, they're often already in the middle or at the end of their term. And they have very little time to fulfill their campaign promises.
Like I said, we're going to put obstacles in your way, and then, of course, our stupid order will be overturned. Well, I mean, a court order, yes, but a lot of time will pass.
That's so interesting. And yesterday, the Ministry of Justice filed a lawsuit against all federal judges, including Mary Renda, accusing them of judicial misconduct. I've never seen anything like this. What do you think is going to happen here?
Exactly. The task is on me. This is an order from the chief judge in
Maryland.
It's something like the Justice of the Red Queen, who would sentence before the verdict. Here you get a court order before the hearing about whether it should even be issued. I think the Trump administration has a strong argument when they say, listen, where does this authority even come from? Congress has laid out the grounds on which immigration cases can be suspended or canceled. In this case, the court states, we don't know what these people are arguing about, but we're just going to make them all be quiet. And I think that raises legitimate objections from the administration. Yeah.
And Jonathan, we have about 30 seconds left. I want to point out something that Judge Samuel Alito once said. It's actually a short quote. Listen.
The problem is that there are 680 district court judges. They are dedicated, they are knowledgeable, and I'm in no way questioning their motives. But, sometimes they make mistakes.
Sometimes they make mistakes. Jonathan, you have the final word, 15 seconds. I think
he's right about this. And by the way, everyone is now watching Judge Alito and Judge Thomas, because on the last day of the session, we often hear announcements about retirements. And that's why there's always some intrigue about whether someone will announce such a decision today.
The Supreme Court has issued a ruling on the right of illegal immigrants and fraudsters to obtain United States citizenship for their children born in the United States of America. And on the topic you were just discussing,
an amazing decision. We are very happy about it. This morning, the Supreme Court achieved a tremendous victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law. By overturning the excessive use of nationwide judicial injunctions that interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch, the Supreme Court has put a stop to presidential power itself. That's what they did. Actually, it was an amazing time. During this last hour, people all over the country were thrilled. I saw so much joy and excitement. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is really very important. I was elected with a historic mandate. But in recent months, we've seen a handful of radically leftist judges actually try to strip the president of legitimate powers and prevent the American people from getting the decisions they voted for in record numbers. Frankly, this posed a serious threat to democracy. And instead of simply making decisions on the specific cases before them, these judges tried to dictate laws for the entire country. In practice, this meant that if any of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of the legitimately elected President of the United States, he or she could block that policy or at least delay it for a long time. By tying it up in the court system, this was a colossal abuse of power, something that had never happened in American history until the last few decades. And we were hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century combined. Just think about it, more than in the entire 20th century. I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and resolving this very, very big and complicated issue, and now everything has become very simple. I want to thank the judge
Barrett, who
brilliantly wrote this opinion, as well as Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh,
and Thomas.
Excellent.
Thank you
for this decision. And thanks to this decision, now we can promptly file a motion to continue implementing a number of policies that were mistakenly blocked at the national level. And some of the cases we're talking about, for example, the repeal of birthright citizenship, are now coming to the forefront. This was intended for the children of slaves. It was not meant for people who are trying to game the system and come to the country on vacation. It was the same date, exactly the same date, the end of the Civil War. This was intended for the children of slaves. And it's so clear and obvious. But now it allows us to address this issue and finally win this case, because hundreds of thousands of people are coming into our country taking advantage of birthright citizenship, but it wasn't created for that. It was intended for the children of slaves. Thanks to this decision, we can now quickly file documents to advance these numerous initiatives and those that were mistakenly blocked across the country, including ending birthright citizenship, stopping funding for sanctuary cities, suspending refugee resettlement, and freezing unnecessary funding.
Under this Supreme Court decision, such presidential orders as stopping funding for cities that have declared themselves sanctuaries for illegal immigrants are affected.
And criminals.
And do not turn them over to the federal authorities. The flow of planes packed with pregnant Chinese women, Russian women, Iranian women, with an industry that brings in billions will be stopped. The deportation of criminals and illegals will continue. It had been stopped. For example, for the house burglar gangsters from the Medesuel gang called Ten de Aragua. If I'm not mistaken again, Trump can shut down the gang and fire the corrupt employees. This has already been stopped by the court and by the Democrats because they are filing lawsuits. There are 5 or 6, so to speak, districts like that where only their people are packed in. All the activists, they bring all their comments and suggestions there, and there they're welcomed right away. It doesn't matter if it's legal or illegal, it doesn't matter because ideology is above everything else for, as we know, the communists. Real communists don't give up unless they decide that they're not real. So now Trump will be able to impose any tariffs, customs duties on any fees and goods. He was stopped from doing that before. At the same time, the states where the Democrats are in charge, well, each state is like its own country. Here, gentlemen, they can block Trump's orders and try to slow them down, but across the entire United States. So what exactly is the victory? Now, everything Trump did that is allowed by the Constitution but was challenged by the Democrats in court is legal. By the way, Trump banned gender reassignment surgeries in the military at the government's expense, and in general, any such surgeries for children under 18.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you for fighting for all Americans. Americans are finally getting what they voted for. It will no longer be the case that individual judges can overturn President Trump's policies across the entire country. Not anymore. Today, in a 6-3 decision, Judge Barrett rightly ruled that the district court does not have the authority to issue nationwide or universal injunctions.
Period. The Supreme Court explained this to its subordinate judges. Shut up.
A representative from Tennessee targeted the candidate for mayor of New York. Republican Andy Ogles sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi urging her to launch an investigation into Zoran Mamdani. Now Ogles is demanding to strip
Mamdani of his citizenship?
He claims that Mamdani may have obtained United States citizenship by, I quote, concealing material support for terrorism.
We need to raise taxes for those who already have more than enough and share a little more with the rest of society. There's nothing hidden from public view about who I am and what I want to fight for. I'm not secretly telling everyone that I'm a socialist now. That's what we built our campaign around.
He wants to build a complete socialist utopia at the expense of multimillionaires and billionaires. And when people start leaving the city, what are you going to do then? Play the clip, Democratic Socialist. He wants to freeze rent. He wants grocery stores to be run by the city. He wants social workers to replace the police because, of course, that will help. He wants to create a $60 billion debt fund for affordable housing, free buses, free childcare, gift sets for newborns, and a minimum wage of $30 an hour. How can anyone even vote for that?
That's him. He's a snake oil salesman.
Uh-huh. The fact that he might be a Muslim extremist or whatever they call him doesn't matter. A minimum wage of $30 is insane. You understand? A minimum wage of $30. That means any job, no matter what it is, has to pay you at least $30 an hour. That means working at a convenience store is $30 an hour. That means cleaning toilets at a school as a janitor is at least $30 an hour. That's it. It's impossible to sustain. And he also wanted to tax every corporation, to raise the tax by 4%. He said that in New Jersey, it's 11%. Right now, they have 7%. He wants to raise the corporate tax in New York to 11%. That's 4% higher than it is now. Corporations will pay hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars more in taxes.
But for what?
And then he goes on and says what he wants. He wants to add a 2% tax increase for those who earn $1 million or more a year. The very fact that he's doing this is crazy, but the reason he's doing it is even crazier. They want to do this to please illegal immigrants in our country. Free buses. Listen, he wants to build a complete socialist utopia at the expense of multimillionaires and billionaires. And when people start leaving the city, what are you going to do?
Exactly. Rich people will go to Long Island or Connecticut, or they'll just change their addresses to a state where they don't get charged an arm and a leg. That's the best case. In the worst case, For New York, I mean, thousands of small businesses will close, and the big ones will move to other cities, far away from the communist paradise. There's no border between New York City and the rest of America, so moving is pretty easy. But what's nice is that Mamdani scared both the right and the left. If they're not very, very left, those who are very, very left, he didn't scare them, he made them happy. Democrats understand that Mamdani will shock all of America, and that his label will be on the entire Democratic
Party. Stand the establishment shocked. The establishment literally ran away from reporters who were asking about Mamdani. Establishment Democrats are in a panic, and it's not just the left saying this, but also the right. Is panic starting? A dumpster fire is engulfing the Democratic Party. It's all because of this lunatic Mamdani. I always want to call him Mandani, but this guy is just ridiculous, and I think everyone understands that. I think it's just posturing for political correctness and a political chase for socialism, but I don't think anything will come of it.
You understand that this is the voice of the people, that these are the very same rednecks the Democrats used to scare us with. I think that Rodnick's logic is perfectly fine. I think that the smarter Republicans, unlike Mamdani, are actually losing their enthusiasm. They understand that people will run away from the Democratic Party. And even if not everyone joins the Republicans, the enemy's forces will still become smaller. Look at what this jerk is proposing. Communism, everything for free. But who will pay for it if it's free for you? Yeah, Uncle Pushkin, probably Lermontov.
Free housing, free buses, universal childcare, and cheap groceries. But I want to ask you one question. Have you ever actually voted for anyone?
In English, in Spanish, and Arabic. Our hero promises everything for free. Food for free, transportation for free, apartments, everything really. Paradise on Earth. It's simply paradise coming to Earth. But how are we going to achieve this paradise? Don't even think about it. If you start thinking, then right away you're her enemy. You're her enemy. Mamdani, your job is to vote, then wait for gifts and stay silent.
Jojo is joining me. How do you assess the reaction of the media Democrats to Mamdani and his victory in the primaries at this point?
Well, you probably noticed that Mamdani's media tour is happening on such sycophantic channels as the ones you just showed. Microsoft and the National Broadcasting Corporation and Cable News Network. This tour doesn't include a single channel. Well, for example, the one we're on right now. Of facts that could dare to ask him questions about his openly crazy policies, including asking a very simple question. And buddy, how are you going to pay for all this? How are you going to pay for universal free childcare, free buses? How are you going to pay for creating city grocery stores? Because someone has to build those places and work there, right? How are you going to pay for government-funded gender reassignment surgeries for minors? And by the way, why should New Yorkers have to pay for it again? I mean, he says he's going to raise taxes. He's going to increase the corporate tax by more than 50%, even though it's already one of the highest in the country. But guess what will happen if they somehow manage to push this through? Any business, any millionaire or billionaire who hasn't left yet will leave the state. They'll take everything with them. those tax revenues with them. By the way, the officers he wants to replace with social workers in high crime areas will leave too. And by the way, proposals like this will lead to innocent people getting killed. But anyway, Cable News Network and Microsoft and the National Broadcasting Corporation will do everything they can to get this guy elected. Because he's a fierce opponent of Trump, an anti-capitalist who knows how to express his thoughts well and has some charisma, I suppose.
What we want?
When do we want it? Do you want it now? Yeah, now. Who should we vote for?
The Democratic Party candidate for mayor of New York will be stripped of American citizenship and deported from the country because of his communist past. Very interesting.
Benny made an interesting observation about who actually votes for and supports Mandavia and socialism in his conversation with Rudy Giuliani.
I'm very, very impressed by the second term. Trump, he almost seems like a different person. He could become president.
Ronald Reagan.
I worked for him for 8 years, and he's my hero. This president is facing problems that Reagan dreamed about and that worried him. He saw that we were heading towards this.
And
if he came back and saw where we are now, he wouldn't be surprised. That's exactly what kept him up at night. And I'll tell you who definitely wouldn't be surprised. Hamilton, Madison, and Jefferson. They were always afraid of a conspiracy that could arise if too many people became fanatics, if too many people were poorly educated. In our society, the educated cause more problems than the uneducated. People wonder why this is so. The educated have been trained to be Marxists, nihilists. They were taught to hate and destroy America. It's strange that they support these crazy ideas. And working people who have to be practical, say like government grocery stores, in the end, the only thing we'll be able to buy is
spam.
That's how it all is actually divided. By these
lines.
The lower and middle classes voted for Cuomo, for Adams, while the upper classes, Wall Street, and the very wealthy neighborhoods voted for Mondami. So this is really champagne socialism. It's egalitarian Marxism, a communist mayor. On Cable News Network, the people at Cable News Network hate
capitalism.
He's not a capitalist. He doesn't like capitalism. They don't like it at all.
Are ashamed of it.
Should a communist have the right to run for office here in America? They are not allowed to become naturalized citizens, Mr. Mayor. It's stated in the naturalization documents. I'm sure you know, you can't be a member of the Communist Party and become a naturalized citizen in this country.
I think you could argue that no, they shouldn't, because they want to destroy the government and we shouldn't vote for destruction. But I don't think that would pass under the current Supreme Court definition of free speech. I don't think we could achieve that. And, you know, at one time, the Communist Party in our country was so harmless that it almost became an American party. The dangerous ones were those communists who actually belonged to cells and had party membership cards. And unfortunately, I know that this causes a strong reaction in many people.
And now let's move on to how Mandavi apparently deceived America.
So we keep digging, the teams continue the investigation, and we actually have breaking news for your show. He became a citizen, a naturalized citizen, in 2018. And at the same time as he's filling out these citizenship applications, he's joining a communist group here in the United States. And if we can reconstruct the timeline of when he joined this group and when he filled out these documents, it could very well disqualify him from obtaining United States citizenship. That's why this is so important, and that's what we're trying to do. Even if for some reason he slips away, slips through our fingers and we can't catch him, We will create a template that will allow us to pursue other radicals who come to this country, obtain citizenship, and are essentially sleeper agents aiming to undermine our government.
Yes, it does seem like this is really a sleeper cell operation. That's right. It's enough to just look at what he stands for. He might currently be under investigation by the Department of Justice. We just learned this from Carmet Dillon, who says, you can't tax people based on their skin color. One of his ideas. Again, that's a very Marxist idea. It's like in his homeland, in Uganda or South Africa. It's normal. Things like that happen there all the time. They start, persecuting certain people because of their skin color. Forgive us, progress.
So they're after Manabi now, and they're not even pretending to play nice anymore.
This is madness. For the first time in a long while, we finally have Iranian officials who are openly contradicting the Supreme Leader. You see, just yesterday, the Supreme Leader finally released a statement from his bunker in which he said that the United States' strike on Iranian targets had failed and did not cause any serious damage. And just a few hours after that statement, the Minister of Foreign Affairs
of Iran publicly
stated on Iranian state television that Iranian nuclear facilities were very heavily damaged. So, in this video, let's figure out what's really going on. Why did disagreements arise?
in Iran. What
damage did the battle cause to Iranian nuclear facilities?
And what is the next step for Iran's Supreme Leader?
Let's start, of course, with his most recent statement. Let's take a look.
Они атаковали наши ядерные объекты?
They attacked our nuclear facilities. This is an issue that in itself deserves to be prosecuted in international courts.
But they don't
manage to achieve anything significant. The President of America greatly exaggerated. It became clear that he needed this exaggeration. The Islamic Republic dealt a serious blow to America by attacking one of its key bases in the region, the Al Udeid Air Base, and caused damage.
It is important to note here that all of this
speech was
a kind of propaganda
for Iranian citizens.
In it, he claimed that Iran had dealt a devastating blow to the United States
by attacking
the American base in Qatar. He presented the Iranian
attack as a complete victory.
He also stated that Iran won this war against Israel, which lasted 12 days.
Usually, whatever the Supreme Leader says, everyone repeats. And now something incredible is happening.
Do you see? This speech was broadcast on Iranian state television. And just a few hours after that, the Iranian foreign minister gave an interview and confirmed
that the United States
had inflicted serious and significant damage to Iranian nuclear facilities, which directly contradicted what had been said just a few hours earlier.
Supreme Leader.
Let's listen to his interview, and then we'll figure out what it really means.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi appeared on Iranian state television and refuted the words of the Iranian Ayatollah. He said that Iran's nuclear program had indeed suffered significant damage.
I have to say that the damage is excessive and serious. And in my opinion, according to the law of the parliament, this decision should be made by the Supreme National Security Council.
Now Araghchi also objected to President Trump and stated that there are no plans for negotiations between representatives of Iran and the United States. Representatives. Now the Grand Council of Iran has taken a measure that prohibits cooperation between Iran and the nuclear oversight body International Atomic Energy Agency. The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency says that this will put Iran outside the framework of international law.
Either the spiritual authority no longer controls the government there, or the leader is just sitting somewhere by himself and no one listens to him anymore.
I think it's very important that the foreign minister is refuting the words of the Iranian Ayatollah on state television. You wouldn't have seen anything like that before. It seems like a move toward modernization. If someone is assessing the situation from a practical point of view and giving their own evaluation, instead of just making the usual loud, militant statements that typically come from Iranian leaders.
Now let's break down the minister's statement
of foreign affairs.
You see, even in the Iranian theocracy where the supreme leader actually
personally chooses
the people who can get on the ballot, there are still different factions within the party, each with different views on how to handle this situation.
Right now, Iran is deciding whether to become part of the movement of civilization toward artificial intelligence, toward a modern economy, toward improving the lives of its people, or to stay behind. To remain in the darkness of obscurantism like in the 17th century, with no chance at all to build prosperity in the country. Well, and now, of course, the cherry on top. Guess what it's about?
Everything that we were accused of, everything we've been accused of in recent years, spreading conspiracy theories, misinformation, that we're both right and crazy, and so on. Now we've been vindicated. We have confirmation after yesterday's closed hearing in Congress. Now we know who was running the White House.
The House Autopen.
And more importantly, it wasn't the person who was supposedly elected, not Joe Biden, to run the country. I'm going to lay it all out for you right now, so let's get straight to the point. Here it is. This is the one who testified yesterday. Her name is Mira Tanden, and nobody elected her. She ran Autopen from 2021 to 2025. So here are the details right here. Her name is Neera Tanden. The scandal erupted around a former high-ranking official from the Biden administration. Her name is Neera Tanden. And yesterday she testified before the House Oversight Committee that she was the one who controlled Joe Biden's Autopen. If you don't know what that is, if you're new to this topic or have been living under a rock for the past 6 years, it's a mechanical device that reproduces signatures. There's nothing new about that, but what happened in the Biden administration was far more outrageous than we could have ever imagined. So, she controlled this Autopen for signing executive orders from October 2021 to May 2023. In fact, this means an unauthorized transfer of authority. That's exactly what she admitted to during the hearings in the Oversight Committee. Tanden admitted that she controlled the Autopen, including giving orders for its use, and in some cases signed Biden's name on
executive orders
from the law. This raises concerns. I would say it raises much more than just concerns about an unelected official exercising presidential powers. Who even elected this Tanden? Who even allowed this? Who was even running our country? A country where we have witnessed some of the most outrageous, ideologically driven, unpatriotic, and treacherous policies since its founding, a conflict of interest. Tanden's previous role at the Center for American Progress involved developing policies that directed federal funds to NGOs, some of which benefited from orders she signed. Well, really? You think so? Here are a few precedents. You know, like we always do with the Cash Moniji case, the Lakishi Big James case, with the fake Don Juan Rashun, the newer kickback fund, the money case, the hush money case in New York against Trump. We always say that the law is based on precedent. It's like something beautiful, but
glowing, connected.
A chain of things that affect something, you know, in 1855 and affect something in 2025. So it's something beautiful. Well, the universality in this eternally connected chain of events. Gerald Ford in the 70s used Autopen signatures for routine correspondence. Well, for example, for thank you letters, but not for executive orders or laws. Barack Obama signed the Patriot Act in 2011 using an Autopen, and in France, it was the first known case of using it for legislation. What a surprise, a Democrat. The opinion of the Department of Justice in 2005 under George W. Bush confirmed its constitutionality, although Bush avoided using it. Ronald Trump criticized Biden's use of the auto pen for pardons. Exactly. But yes, we use it. Trump uses it too. Every president uses it. But here is the difference in the scope of authority. Previous use was limited, restricted, and controlled by elected officials. Tandon, an unelected aide, was in charge of this process for 20
months. 20
months. My fellow citizens
of America, including
significant decrees on a scale that is unprecedented in recorded history. As I always do, I want to be objective. All right, but I think this might be the most important point here. That's why a hearing was held in Congress. It's a pity it wasn't shown on television. I don't understand why it wasn't
broadcast.
Was not the chosen assistant who supposedly led this process. The use of an auto pen for 20 months, including important and significant orders, which may have led to the worst migration crisis in our country's history. Crime rate, Trindiaragua. Think about Rachel Marin, daughter of Patty Marin. Think about Jocelyn Nunger. Think about Aurora, Colorado. Think all the consequences we see in our major cities, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, and everywhere else. This is the result of the ideology and policies of DI and woke ideas. When our tax dollars go to fund endless wars overseas, the war between Ukraine and Russia is an absolute tragedy.
We don't know who decided whom to fight, whom to help, or what to promise to whom. We don't know who let 10, maybe 12 million illegal immigrants into the country, or who decided to flee from Afghanistan. We have no idea who took money away from the police and, by doing so, created an atmosphere of crime in all the big cities of America. But thank God we're trying to sort this out, to clear up this nightmare and figure things out. And today, the Supreme Court gave us that opportunity. And that's why, exactly why, today is a wonderful day. Congratulations to all of you. Until next time.